Do you know what, Miss Chase? You can shove your rules right where your ambitions of becoming a good teacher are. Tyler Hunter hurled the textbook straight at the board, his voice echoing through the classroom. The entire class fell silent, bracing for an explosion. Rebecca Chase slowly turned to him, and what happened next would forever change not only this school, but the lives of everyone present. Tyler, her voice was quieter than a whisper, but each word sliced through the air like a blade. Your father called me this morning. Do you want to know what we talked about? The boy's face instantly paled. A dead silence hung in the classroom. The most interesting part was yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. In the Roosevelt School in the suburbs of Chicago, it was not academic achievements that were celebrated, but its toxic atmosphere. This was a place where teachers' dreams came to die, and parents' hopes shattered against the walls of indifference and cruelty. Over the past 3 years, 14 English teachers had come and gone. Some left after the first week, others lasted a month, but the outcome was always the same: defeat. At the center of this chaos were 3 seniors: Tyler Hunter, Jake Morrison, and Connor Blackwell. They were referred to as the Triad, not for their number, but for the destructive power they represented. They were not just difficult teenagers. They were children who had learned from an early age that their parents' money and connections made them untouchable. Tyler Hunter, 17 years old, son of Congressman Richard Hunter, tall, athletic, with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. Behind his attractive exterior lay a deep emptiness, the result of a childhood spent under the care of nannies while his parents built their political careers. His weapon was charisma, the ability to rally others around him, to turn anyone into an accomplice or a victim. Jake Morrison, 16 years old, son of District Court Judge Margaret Morrison. Short, skinny, with dark hair and a mind so sharp it frightened even teachers. His cruelty was surgically precise. He could find the most painful point in anyone and strike right there. Behind his sadistic tendencies lay a deep trauma. At 10 years old, he accidentally overheard his mother telling a colleague that she regretted his birth, that her career was more important than motherhood. Connor Blackwell, 17 years old, son of the owner of the largest construction company in the district, Thomas Blackwell. Big, silent, with red hair and a freckled face that could instantly shift from good-natured to menacingly cold. His violence was physical, brutal, but he never acted without the orders of the other two. Deep down, he remained that frightened child who hid in the closet when his father came home drunk and raised his hand against his mother. The school principal, Robert Fisher, a 54-year-old man with a receding hairline and perpetually trembling hands, had long since given up on the situation. He knew that the parents of these 3 could destroy his career with a single phone call. It was better to turn a blind eye to their antics and hope they would finally finish school and become someone else's problem. The other teachers formed an unspoken survival coalition. They avoided confrontation, gave good grades, and asked no unnecessary questions. Mary Collins, the math teacher, cried every evening at home, but continued to smile at school. David Thornton, the history teacher, started taking antidepressants after the Triad locked him in his own classroom for an entire night. Susan Wright, the chemistry teacher, had submitted her resignation 3 times, but each time she took it back, she needed the job to pay off her mortgage. And so into this atmosphere of despair and capitulation stepped Rebecca Chase, 32 years old, of average height, with chestnut hair pulled back into a strict bun, and green eyes that reflected such determination it seemed almost frightening. Her resume looked impressive. A master's degree in linguistics from Harvard, 3 years of teaching at an elite private school in Boston, a year working at an international school in London. But the most intriguing line was 2 years of volunteer teaching at a juvenile correctional facility in Maine. Robert Fisher didn't delve into the details. He needed a warm body for the English teacher position, and Rebecca Chase seemed qualified enough to last at least until the end of the semester. What he didn't know was the true reason Rebecca left the elite private school in Boston. There she faced a similar situation, a group of spoiled children from wealthy families who believed themselves above the law. But when she tried to stop them, the parents united against her. She was accused of overstepping her authority, of inappropriate behavior, of trying to harm innocent children. She was fired and learned that power and money could bury the truth deeper than any grave. A year of working in London was an attempt to escape that trauma, but the pain haunted her. She woke up at night in a cold sweat, remembering the faces of her former students who looked at her triumphantly as she was escorted out of the school by security guards. She realized she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try again, but this time she would be ready. 2 years in the correctional facility taught her to understand the psychology of aggression, to work with teenagers who had already crossed the line. She studied their methods, their weaknesses, their fears. She learned to be not just a teacher, but a strategist, a psychologist, and if necessary, a warrior. The first day at Roosevelt School became reconnaissance for her. She walked through the halls, observing the dynamics among the students, noting who was afraid of whom, who followed whom, where the security cameras were located, which teachers were broken, and which still retained some semblance of fighting spirit. She saw Tyler Hunter discussing something with a group of girls, and from their frightened faces, she understood it was not a friendly conversation. She watched Jake Morrison methodically humiliating a shy boy at his locker, choosing his words with surgical precision to inflict maximum pain without crossing the line that would bring punishment. She saw Connor Blackwell accidentally shove a younger student so that he spilled all his textbooks, and then help him pick them up while stepping on the boy's glasses. But the most important discovery she made was in the teacher's lounge. Entering during lunch break, she saw a group of weary educators speaking in hushed voices like conspirators. "Did you hear? The new English teacher is coming tomorrow," Mary Collins whispered, nervously clutching her coffee cup. "How long do you think she'll last? A week? 2? David Thornton scoffed cynically. "The poor thing has no idea what she's getting into." Susan Wright shook her head. "Remember Jennifer Green? She cried right in class when they password protected her presentation. And Michael Davis? He still stutters after that paint incident in his car." "The problem is their parents are untouchable," sighed gym teacher Jim Parker. "Congressman Hunter funds half the school programs. Judge Morrison can dismiss any case against his son. And Old Man Blackwell built half the buildings in this area, including the principal's house. So what do we do? Endure until they graduate?" The young biology teacher Linda Garcia asked bitterly. "The alternative is to lose our jobs and never find another one in education," David grimly stated. "They'll make sure our names are blacklisted." Rebecca listened to this conversation, standing behind the slightly open door, feeling a familiar fire ignite within her. This was exactly what she had faced in Boston, a system built on fear, where power and money triumph over justice. But this time, everything would be different. This time, she was ready. That evening at home, Rebecca spent several hours on the computer, researching publicly available information about the Hunter, Morrison, and Blackwell families. News articles, official biographies, press releases. She gathered only what was accessible to the public. She learned that Congressman Richard Hunter had been involved in several corruption scandals, but had always managed to wriggle out thanks to his influential connections. His wife, Patricia, was known in high society for her charitable events, but behind closed doors, they had a marriage of facade. For the last 5 years, they had lived practically separately, maintaining the appearance of a family only for the public. Judge Margaret Morrison was the Iron Lady of Justice, known for her harsh sentences. But in her personal life, she had serious alcohol problems that she carefully hid from the public. Her husband, Dr. Peter Morrison, had filed for divorce twice, but each time he withdrew the petition under pressure from his wife. Thomas Blackwell, a construction magnate, was a self-made man. He grew up in a poor family and worked his way up from a laborer to the owner of an empire. But that path was littered with dubious deals and broken lives of competitors. His wife had died of cancer 3 years ago, and since then, he had drowned himself in work and alcohol, practically neglecting the upbringing of his son. But the most important thing Rebecca discovered was that each of these influential parents had vulnerabilities. Congressman Hunter was preparing for re-election, and any scandal could ruin his career. Judge Morrison was running for a position on the state Supreme Court, and her reputation had to be impeccable. Thomas Blackwell was bidding on the construction of a new airport, a contract worth $500 million, and even the slightest blemish on his reputation could cost him that deal. After studying all this information, Rebecca realized that she had leverage, but it needed to be used very carefully and at the right moment. That same day, during lunch break, she went to see Principal Fisher. "Mr. Fisher, I would like to discuss the specifics of teaching at your school," she said, sitting down across from his desk. The principal nervously adjusted his tie. Something in her tone made him wary. "Of course, Miss Chase. What exactly interests you?" "Disciplinary policy, procedures for dealing with difficult students, communication with parents." She paused, studying his face intently. "And the surveillance system." "Surveillance?" Fisher asked, becoming even more anxious. "Yes, I noticed cameras in the hallways. Are they operational?" Fisher hesitated. "Yes, they were recently installed, but I don't delve into technical details." Rebecca nodded, mentally noting this information. Thank you for the clarification. One more question. Does the school have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying? Of course, Fisher replied hastily. We do not tolerate any forms of aggression or harassment. Wonderful. So if I encounter such cases, I can count on your full support. The principal felt his mouth go dry. He understood where she was heading but couldn't refuse without looking like someone who covers for bullies. Of course, Miss Chase. The school administration always supports teachers in maintaining discipline. Excellent. Then I think we will get along just fine. Leaving the principal's office, Rebecca headed to her classroom. There were still 20 minutes before the lesson began, but she wanted to prepare thoroughly. The classroom was typical for a public school. Worn desks, peeling paint on the walls, a board scratched from numerous predecessors. But Rebecca saw it not as a place of poverty, but as a battlefield, and she was determined to win this war. She arranged the desks not in traditional rows, but in a semicircle so that every student was visible and could not hide behind the backs of others. On the board, she wrote a single phrase: words have power, choose them wisely. The bell rang for class precisely at 8 in the morning. The students began to enter the classroom, and it quickly became clear who was in charge. Tyler Hunter walked in first, like a king entering his domain. He was followed by Jake and Connor, and then the other students, who instinctively kept a respectful distance from the triad. Rebecca stood by the board, not smiling, not trying to appear friendly. She simply observed as each student took their seat, memorizing the hierarchy, alliances, and fears. Tyler ostentatiously sat at the back, throwing his legs over the neighboring chair. Jake settled next to him, pulled out his phone, and began typing something without even glancing at the teacher. Connor silently took a seat to Tyler's left, crossing his arms over his chest in a pose that clearly said, "Try to make me do anything." The other students positioned themselves closer to the middle of the class, trying to remain unnoticed. In the front row sat a skinny girl with braids, Amy Johnson, the straight A student who prayed every day not to be noticed. Next to her was Brian Kennedy, a quiet boy in glasses whose only fault was being smart in a school where intelligence was seen as a sign of weakness. Once everyone was settled, Rebecca slowly walked around the semicircle, stopping next to each student for a few seconds. She didn't say a word, just looked. Some averted their eyes, others tried to look defiant, but gradually everyone understood that this woman saw right through them. When she reached Tyler, he looked up and bestowed upon her his signature cocky smile. "So, new girl, what do you think of our cozy class?" Rebecca stopped in front of him but didn't respond. She simply stood and stared until the smile began to slide off his face. The silence stretched, becoming increasingly tense. Finally, Tyler couldn't take it anymore. "Hey, I'm talking to you." "I hear you," Rebecca replied calmly. "I'm just wondering why a person who calls himself a leader starts a conversation with a display of disrespect." "Disrespect?" Tyler laughed, but the laughter sounded forced. "I was just saying hello in a friendly way." "No. You tried to establish dominance using a condescending tone and informal address. That's classic bullying tactics." Rebecca took a step closer. "But you know what really surprises me? A person with your data and capabilities chooses the most primitive methods of self-assertion." A tense silence hung in the classroom. No one expected the new teacher to speak to Tyler Hunter as an equal. Tyler felt his cheeks begin to burn. "Listen, miss. What's your name again?" "Miss Chase. And I am indeed listening. I'm waiting for you to say something worthwhile." Jake Morrison looked up from his phone, sensing that his leader was in an awkward position. "Maybe we should start the lesson. We didn't gather here for philosophical discussions." Rebecca shifted her gaze to him. "Mr. Morrison, if I'm not mistaken." Jake was surprised that she knew his name but didn't show it. "Got it on the first try. Impressive deductive reasoning. Not deduction, preparation. I studied the personal files of all the students in this class." She scanned the room. "I know your grades, your interests, your future plans. And you know what surprised me the most?" The class held its breath in anticipation. "Potential. Each of you possesses outstanding abilities. Mr. Hunter, you have the highest leadership quotient I've seen in my entire career. Mr. Morrison, your IQ is in the top 5% of the population. Mr. Blackwell, your spatial reasoning scores exceed those of most engineers." The three boys exchanged glances, unsure how to react to the unexpected compliments. "But you know what disappoints me?" Rebecca continued. "You waste these gifts, creating an atmosphere of fear and humiliation. It's like using a Stradivarius violin as firewood." Tyler felt a stab deep inside. No one had ever spoken to him like that. neither flattering nor condemning, just stating the facts, forcing him to look at himself from the outside. "And what do you propose, Miss Chase?" he said slowly. "To turn us into goody-goodies? I propose to turn you into leaders, real leaders who are respected, not feared." She returned to the board and faced the class. "But for that, you will have to make a choice. To continue playing the role of school tyrants or to become who you can truly be." "And what if we choose the former?" Jake challenged. Rebecca smiled, and that smile was colder than an Arctic wind. "Then you will find out what it means to meet someone who is not afraid of you, your parents, or their money." Connor Blackwell, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Bold words. But all teachers talk big on the first day. And then they realize who they are dealing with and give up, Rebecca finished for him. "You know what your mistake is, Mr. Blackwell? You judge me by your past experiences, but I am not like those teachers you are used to breaking." "And what's the difference?" Tyler asked mockingly. "I have already been broken, and I put myself back together, becoming stronger." These words hung in the air, making everyone think. There was something in Rebecca's voice that convinced them. She was not bluffing. "But enough philosophy." Rebecca suddenly changed her tone, becoming businesslike. "Let's talk about the English language, specifically about the power of words." She turned to the board and underlined the written phrase, "Words have power. Choose them wisely." Who can give an example of a situation where words changed the course of history? Several hands went up hesitantly. Rebecca nodded at Amy Johnson. "Martin Luther King's 'I Have a Dream' speech," the girl said quietly. "Great example, Miss Johnson. Now tell me, what made that speech so powerful? He talked about a dream, not about problems?" "Exactly. He painted a picture of a future that people wanted to see. He used the power of positive vision." Rebecca turned to the class. "And now for a tougher question. Who can give an example of how words have destroyed?" The class fell silent. Finally, unexpectedly, Brian Kennedy raised his hand. "Nazi propaganda," he said in a trembling voice. "Right. They used words to demonize entire groups of people, creating an atmosphere of hatred." Rebecca scanned the class. "And do you know what's the scariest part? It worked because people chose to believe those words." Tyler felt the conversation taking an uncomfortable turn for him. "What are you getting at, Miss Chase?" "That every day each of us chooses to use words for creation or destruction, and that choice determines who we become." Jake scoffed. "Sounds nice in theory, but in real life, the strongest wins." "Mr. Morrison, how do you define strength? The ability to intimidate? To force compliance?" Rebecca approached his desk. "Or the ability to inspire, to lead, to change the world for the better?" "The difference is that the first works here and now," Jake replied defiantly. "You're right. Fear is a quick way to get what you want. But do you know what the problem is?" Rebecca sat on the edge of her desk, adopting a more informal posture. "Fear is like a drug. At first you need a small dose, then more and more. And eventually there comes a moment when fear is no longer enough." "And then what?" Connor asked, intrigued despite himself. "Then there is only emptiness left, because no one loves a tyrant. They tolerate him as long as they have to, but deep down everyone is waiting for his downfall." Tyler felt an unpleasant chill in his chest. Those words resonated with something painfully familiar. How many times had he seen that look in his classmates' eyes? Not respect, but suppressed hatred. "And what do you propose instead?" he asked, quieter than usual. "Earn respect for real. Become the kind of person that others want to emulate, not someone they fear." "And how do you achieve that?" Rebecca smiled, and this time her smile was warm. "Start protecting the weak instead of humiliating them. Use your influence to help, not to destroy. Set an example. Don't dictate terms." Jake shook his head skeptically. "Sounds like a Sunday school sermon." "Mr. Morrison, may I ask you a personal question?" Jake tensed up but nodded. "When you come home and are alone with yourself, are you proud of what you do at school?" The question caught him off guard. He was silent for a few seconds, wrestling with himself, and then honestly replied, "No." "Thank you for your honesty. Now imagine what it would be like if you could be proud of yourself every day." A thoughtful silence hung in the classroom. Rebecca felt she had breached the first line of their defenses. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. The bell signaling the end of the lesson rang suddenly, interrupting the students' thoughts. They began to gather their things, but Rebecca stopped them. "Before you leave, I want to give you some homework." Groans of disappointment rolled through the class. "Not the kind of assignment you're expecting. I want each of you to think about one question. How do I want to be remembered? She scanned the room. No need to write anything down, no reports to submit. Just think. Honestly, the students began to exit the classroom, but Rebecca noticed that the atmosphere had changed. They weren't laughing or chattering as usual. They were deep in thought. Tyler, Jake, and Connor lingered until the end, clearly discussing something among themselves in hushed voices. When they finally headed for the exit, Tyler turned around. "Ms. Chase, did you really teach in a prison?" "In a juvenile correctional facility," she clarified. "And what were they like? The inmates?" Rebecca looked at him closely. "Very much like you. Smart, talented, but convinced that the world was against them. And do you know what was the saddest part?" "What?" "Most of them ended up there not because of bad genes or inherent anger. They ended up there because no one showed them another way." Tyler nodded and silently left the classroom, with his friends following behind. Left alone, Rebecca sank into a chair and allowed herself a moment to relax. The first round had gone better than she expected. She had managed to make them think, to awaken doubts about the correctness of their actions. But she knew this was just the calm before the storm. During lunch, she decided to walk around the school to better understand the dynamics of relationships among the students. What she saw only confirmed her worst fears. In the cafeteria, the triad sat at their table like a royal family, surrounded by a retinue of flatterers and sycophants. The other students kept their distance, as if there were an invisible force field around them. Occasionally, one of the three would throw a mocking remark at a passing student, and they would immediately lower their heads, quickening their pace. Rebecca noticed Amy Johnson, a girl from her class, carrying a tray of food and accidentally spilling some juice on the floor near the triad's table. Tyler immediately took notice. "Hey, clumsy, didn't your mom tell you to watch where you're going?" Amy blushed and started to apologize, bending down to wipe up the puddle with a napkin. "No need to apologize," Rebecca's calm voice suddenly rang out. She approached the table and handed Amy some napkins. "Accidents happen to everyone." Tyler looked up at the teacher, and his expression showed surprise and slight irritation at having his performance interrupted. "Ms. Chase, we were just helping Miss Johnson be more careful," he said with a fake smile. "I see. And what do you think, Mr. Hunter? Does public humiliation help someone become more confident?" "I didn't humiliate anyone. I just pointed out a mistake." Rebecca nodded at Amy, signaling her that she could leave, and then sat down on the empty chair next to Tyler. Her action was so unexpected that silence fell over the cafeteria for a moment. "Mr. Hunter, allow me to share an observation with you. True leaders never strengthen their position at the expense of belittling others. They lift everyone around them." "And you're an expert on leadership?" Jake sneered. "I'm an expert on human behavior. And you know what I see when I look at the three of you?" "What?" Connor asked defiantly. "Three very scared boys who use aggression to hide their vulnerability." Rebecca's words landed like a slap. Tyler felt something inside him tighten with pain and rage at the same time. "You don't know anything about us," he hissed. "I know more than you think. I know that you, Mr. Hunter, deep down, are afraid of disappointing a father who sees you only as an extension of his political ambitions. I know that you, Mr. Morrison, still remember every harsh word from your mother and are trying to prove that you deserve her love by hurting others. And I know that you, Mr. Blackwell, blame yourself for your mother's death and think you deserve punishment." Connor paled and abruptly stood up from the table. "How do you—" "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. I'm not finished." Something in her tone made him comply, even though he was boiling with rage inside. "I know all this not because I've been spying on you. I know it because I've seen hundreds of boys just like you. Smart, talented, but broken by pain they don't know how to express in a healthy way." "And what do you propose? Group therapy?" Jake asked cynically, but there was a tremor in his voice. "I propose the opportunity to become who you are meant to be. Not copies of your parents, not victims of circumstances, but yourselves." Tyler looked her straight in the eye. "What if we like who we are? Then explain to me why each of you looks unhappy when you think no one is watching." That hit home. Rebecca saw the mask beginning to crack, revealing the pain and confusion beneath them. "Think about what I said," she added, standing up. "Each of you has a choice. You can continue playing the roles that circumstances have imposed on you, or you can find the courage to become who you truly want to be." She turned and headed for the exit of the cafeteria, leaving the three boys in shock. Curious onlookers gathered around them, but the triad didn't notice. They were too shaken by the fact that someone dared to look behind their masks and see the real them. "How could she know about my mom?" Connor whispered. I don't know, Tyler replied grimly, but she's playing for keeps. What are we going to do? Jake asked. Tyler was silent for a long time, then slowly said, we'll show her what it means to play psychological games with us. But even as he said those words, he felt they didn't sound as convincing as before. Something had changed. Something in that woman's words had struck chords in his soul that he preferred to forget. After school, Rebecca lingered in the teacher's lounge, sorting through lesson plans when Mary Collins approached her. Rebecca, can I talk to you? Of course, Mary. What's bothering you? Mary glanced around nervously, making sure they were alone, and then quietly said, I heard you had, an interesting day with the triad. News travels fast. In a school like this, yes. I wanted to warn you, they won't let this go easily. Usually they give new teachers a couple of days to adjust, and then the real hell begins. Rebecca put down her pen and looked at her colleague intently. Mary, how long have you been working here? 8 years. And how many of those years have you been afraid of your own students? Mary lowered her eyes. All 8. Have you ever thought about how it could be different? Of course I have. But what can I do? She is not just an English teacher, Dad. She is someone who could challenge everything we built. Tyler sat up, his frustration bubbling to the surface. You can't control everything, you know. Maybe it's time to let me think for myself. Richard's expression hardened. Thinking for yourself is a privilege, not a right. You need to understand that the world is not as simple as she makes it seem. There are consequences to every action. Tyler clenched his fists. So what? I should just sit back and let you dictate my life? I'm not you, Dad. Richard stepped closer, his voice low and intense. You will be. You have to be. The moment you start questioning the status quo is the moment you lose your edge. You need to stay ahead of the game. Maybe I don't want to play your game anymore. Tyler shot back, feeling a surge of defiance. Richard's eyes narrowed. You think you can just walk away from this? From your responsibilities? From our family legacy? Tyler took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool. I don't want to be part of a legacy that values power over people. Maybe I want to make a difference in a different way. Richard's face turned a shade darker. You think you can change the world with your idealism? It doesn't work that way, son. You need to be pragmatic. And what does that mean? To be like you? To crush anyone who stands in my way? Tyler felt the heat rising in his cheeks. Richard's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. You need to understand that compassion is a weakness in this world. You can't afford to be weak. Tyler shook his head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Maybe it's time for you to realize that strength can come from kindness too. Richard's expression softened for just a moment, but then he steeled himself again. You have a choice to make, Tyler. You can either follow in my footsteps or risk losing everything. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Tyler alone with his thoughts. The weight of his father's expectations hung heavy in the air, but beneath it all, Tyler felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could forge his own path. As he stared at the ceiling once more, he thought about Rebecca's words. Perhaps there was a way to break free from the cycle of fear and aggression. Maybe he could be the one to change the narrative. Teachers have a tremendous influence on shaping one's worldview. And if that woman is trying to instill weakness in you, disguising it as virtue, then she is dangerous. What if she is right? The words escaped Tyler before he had a chance to think them through. His father looked at him with an expression as if his son had slapped him in the face. Right about what? About the fact that you can be a leader without belittling others. That you can earn respect, not fear. Richard Hunter slowly approached the window and remained silent for a while, gazing at the impeccably trimmed lawn. Tyler, let me share a life lesson with you. In the world of politics, in the world of big money and power, there is no place for sentimentality. Only those who are willing to be tougher than their competitors survive. But I don't want to become a politician. The father turned sharply. What did you say? I said I don't want to be a politician. I want... Tyler fell silent, realizing that he didn't even know what he truly wanted. What do you want? To become a teacher? A social worker? To squander all the advantages I've created for you? I want to be happy, Tyler said quietly. Happiness is a luxury that only the strong can afford. And strength comes through power, power through influence, influence through fear and respect. Richard stepped closer to his son. That teacher is trying to make you weak, Tyler, and I won't allow it. What do you mean? If she becomes a problem, I will deal with her. I have enough connections on the school board to get rid of unsuitable staff. Tyler felt something inside him rebel against those words. Dad, please don't. Let me handle it myself. Fine. You have a week to put that woman in her place. If you can't manage, I will intervene. When his father left, Tyler was left alone with his thoughts. For the first time in his life, he felt a real inner conflict. Part of him wanted to prove to his father that he could handle any problem. But another part, the one he usually suppressed diligently, whispered that maybe Miss Chase was right. Maybe there was another way. At the same time, a different drama was unfolding in Judge Morrison's house. Jake sat in his mother's office, watching her sort through legal cases. Margaret Morrison was a woman of iron. She never showed weakness, never displayed emotions, always controlled the situation. Mom, can I ask you a question? Of course, Jacob. But make it quick. I have a lot of work. Have you ever regretted having children? Margaret froze, not lifting her eyes from the documents. Silence reigned in the office for several seconds. Why do you ask? Just curious. Jacob, I don't understand the point of this conversation. I have children, that's a fact. Why should I regret that? But if you had a choice, Margaret finally looked up. Life doesn't give us choices, son. It gives us circumstances, and we must deal with them in the best way possible. What if it did? His mother looked at him for a long time, and Jake could see her weighing each word. Jacob, you are my son, and I care about your future. But motherhood has never been my calling. I was made for justice, for law, for order. Those words struck Jake harder than any physical blow. He knew the truth, had heard it before, but hoped he was mistaken. I see, he said quietly and stood up, heading for the door. Jacob, wait. His mother's voice stopped him. That doesn't mean I'm not proud of you. You are a smart, talented boy with a great future, but not the son you would have wanted. Margaret didn't respond, and that was an answer in itself. In the Blackwell household, a special atmosphere of sadness prevailed. Thomas Blackwell sat in his office with a glass of whiskey, staring at a photograph of his late wife. Connor stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. Dad? What is it, son? Can we talk? Thomas waved his hand, inviting his son in. Connor cautiously sat in the chair opposite his father. What do you want to talk about? About Mom. About what happened. Thomas's face darkened. Connor, we've already discussed this. Your mother died of cancer. No one is to blame. But if I hadn't gotten the flu back then, she wouldn't have gone to the pharmacy in the rain. She wouldn't have caught a cold, and the doctors would have detected it earlier. Enough, his father interrupted sharply. Stop blaming yourself for what was inevitable. But you blame me too. I see it in your eyes every day. Thomas set down his glass and looked intently at his son. Connor, I don't blame you for your mother's death. I blame myself. Yourself? I was so busy with work, building my empire, that I missed the symptoms. When she started complaining about fatigue, I said everyone goes through tough times. When she started losing weight, I thought she was just watching her figure. If I had been a more attentive husband, Dad, you couldn't have known. I could have, I should have. And instead, I only thought about money, about projects, about how to make us even richer. Thomas took a glass and took a big sip. And now all that money can't bring her back. Connor felt his throat tighten. He had never seen his father so vulnerable. Maybe if we try, he began, but his father interrupted him. Try what? To move on? To be happy? Thomas laughed bitterly. Connor, some losses are irreparable. We can only learn to live with them. What if there's another way? What way? I don't know, but today our new teacher said something. She said that everyone can change, become better. Teacher, Thomas frowned. What teacher? Miss Chase. She's different. She sees through people but doesn't judge. Connor, teachers come and go. Don't get too attached to their words. What if she's right? What if we really can become better? Thomas looked at his son for a long time, and Connor saw the struggle between cynicism and hope in his eyes. Son, if this woman can help you find the peace that I don't have, then maybe it's worth listening to her. It was the first time in 3 years that his father hadn't dismissed the idea that life could get better. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at school earlier than usual. She wanted to prepare for what awaited her. Her intuition told her that the triad would not leave yesterday's conversation unanswered. She was right. Entering her classroom, she found the board covered with profanity, and on her desk lay a note. Last warning. Stop meddling in other people's business, or you'll regret it. Rebecca calmly read the note, took a photo of the board, and began erasing it. She knew this was just the beginning and was ready for escalation. A few minutes later, the first students entered the classroom. They expected to see an angry or frightened teacher, but Rebecca looked completely calm. "Good morning," she greeted them as if nothing had happened. Amy Johnson cautiously raised her hand. "Miss Chase, what was written on the board?" "Nothing important, Miss Johnson. Just someone decided to demonstrate their limited vocabulary." When the triad arrived, they clearly expected to see a different reaction. Tyler entered the classroom with a confident demeanor, but his face slightly darkened when he saw that the teacher looked absolutely unflappable. "So, Miss Chase, did you get our message?" he asked challengingly. "I did, Mr. Hunter. Very telling." "And what do you intend to do?" "The same thing I did yesterday. Teach you English." Rebecca turned to the board and wrote a new phrase. "Character is what you do when no one is watching." Who can translate this phrase? A few hands went up hesitantly. "Miss Johnson? Character is what you do when no one is watching?" "Exactly. Now a more difficult question. What do you think this phrase means?" The class was silent. Finally, unexpectedly, Brian Kennedy raised his hand. "That a real person doesn't change depending on whether there are witnesses to their actions?" "Great interpretation, Mr. Kennedy. Why do you think some people behave differently in the presence of others and when they are alone?" Because they are afraid of judgment?" one of the girls suggested uncertainly. "Partially, yes. But there is another reason. Who can guess what it is?" Connor Blackwell suddenly spoke up. "Because they don't know who they really are." All heads turned to him. Usually Connor remained silent in class, allowing Tyler and Jake to speak. "Interesting thought, Mr. Blackwell. Can you elaborate on it?" Connor hesitated but then continued. "If a person doesn't know their true values, they behave as others expect them to. And when they are alone, they don't know how to act." "Exactly." Rebecca smiled, and Connor felt a strange warmth from her approval. Now a question for everyone. How can one know their true values? Tyler, who had been silent until now, suddenly said, "Maybe some people find it easier not to know." "Why is that, Mr. Hunter?" "Because then they don't have to take responsibility for their actions. They can always say, 'I didn't know what I was doing.'" Rebecca nodded. "You've touched on a very important topic. Ignorance can be a form of protection. But what price do we pay for that protection?" Jakey, who had been demonstratively ignoring the lesson, unexpectedly joined the discussion. "The price of constant anxiety. If you don't know who you are, you never know if you're doing the right thing." "Exactly, Mr. Morrison. And that anxiety can manifest as aggression, attempts to control others because you can't control yourself." Rebecca's words hung in the air, and the class fell into thoughtful silence. Each person present understood that the conversation was not just about philosophical abstractions, but about their own lives. "What if a person knows who they are, but they don't like it?" Amy quietly asked. "Great question, Miss Johnson. And you know what's most surprising? We are not static. We can change, grow, become better. But for that, we need the courage to look at ourselves honestly." "And then what?" Tyler asked. "Then real life begins. A life where your actions align with your beliefs, where you don't play roles but truly live." The bell signaling the end of the lesson rang too soon. The students slowly gathered their things, clearly reluctant to interrupt the conversation. When the class emptied, Rebecca noticed another note on her desk. But this time the handwriting was different, and the words were entirely different. "Thank you for the lesson. I think you are right. K." She understood that K meant Connor, and it was the first sign that her words were indeed reaching someone. But while Connor was starting to open up, Tyler, on the contrary, felt a growing resistance within him. After class, he gathered his friends on the empty staircase. "Did you see what she's doing?" he said angrily. "She's turning us into some whiny philosophers." "Maybe that's not so bad," Connor suggested uncertainly. "Not so bad?" Tyler looked at him in confusion. "Connor, have you forgotten who we are? We rule this school, and she's trying to turn us into pathetic losers who analyze every step we take." "Or maybe we really are pathetic losers who just hide it well," Jake said quietly. Tyler turned sharply to him. "What did you say?" I said that maybe she sees us as we really are, and that's scary." "Nothing scares me," Tyler shouted, but his voice trembled. "Tyler, calm down," Connor intervened. "We all understand what's happening. We've never talked to each other honestly. We've always played roles. And what's wrong with that? Those roles make us strong." "No, Tyler, those roles make us lonely," Jake said bitterly. Those words hit Tyler like a thunderbolt because they were the truth. After all the years of friendship, after all the time spent together, they had never been truly close. They were united by common interests, common enemies, but not by common experiences. "All right," Tyler said slowly. "Do you want honesty? Here's your honesty. This woman is dangerous, not because she can harm us, but because she makes us doubt ourselves. And doubt is weakness." "Or maybe doubt is the beginning of wisdom," Connor suggested. "Wisdom? Connor, look around. Wise people do not rule the world. The world is ruled by those who are willing to go all the way for their goals." "And who will we become if we go down that path?" Jake asked. "Copies of our parents?" The question hung in the air, and each of the three mentally envisioned their future. Tyler saw himself in a congressman's suit, delivering speeches he didn't believe in. Jake imagined himself in a judge's robe, handing down sentences without sympathy for the defendants. Connor saw himself in an office of a construction company, thinking only about profit. "Maybe Miss Chase is right," Connor finally said. "Maybe there's another way." "What way?" Tyler asked tiredly. For the first time in many years, he felt lost. "I don't know, but I'm willing to find out." Jake nodded. "Me too." Tyler looked at his friends and realized he was at a crossroads. He could try to turn everything back, make them play their old roles, or he could take a risk and follow them into the unknown. "All right," he said after a long pause. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it together. And if something goes wrong, we'll manage," Connor said confidently. "Together." For the first time in a long while, a real closeness settled between the three friends. Not based on common enemies or shared pranks, but on mutual trust and a willingness to be vulnerable with each other. But their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Tyler's mobile phone. The screen lit up. "Dad!" "Tyler, where are you?" "At school, Dad. Classes aren't over yet. I need to talk to you, right now. Come home." "But I still..." "Now, Tyler!" The connection dropped, leaving Tyler with an uneasy feeling. Something in his father's voice suggested that something serious had happened. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "I don't know. Dad is calling me home. He sounds angry." "Maybe he found out about what happened this morning," Connor suggested. "Maybe. Listen, I'll go figure it out. See you tomorrow." Tyler hurried to the exit, while his friends remained in the hallway, exchanging worried glances. At home, Tyler was met with a serious conversation. Only his father was sitting in the living room, but his expression indicated that the talk would not be easy. "Sit down, Tyler," his father said sternly. "What's going on?" "What's going on is that I'm hearing strange things about your behavior at school, that you're starting to ask inappropriate questions. Doubting obvious things? Is that bad? It's dangerous. Doubt is a luxury that leaders cannot afford." Richard Hunter looked intently at his son. "Do you understand now what the problem is? Teachers can be very influential, especially those who can eloquently speak about high ideals." Tyler remained silent, feeling an internal conflict. "What do you want from me?" "A simple thing," his father said. "Make sure this teacher understands the boundaries of her influence. One serious conversation, and the problem will be solved." "And what if I can't?" "Then we'll find another way," his father replied coldly. "But it's better if you do it. It will show that you're ready to defend the family's interests." Tyler stood up and headed for the door. "I need to think." "There's no time for thinking, son. You have 3 days." "And what if I refuse?" Richard Hunter slowly rose from his chair. "Tyler, you are my son and I love you, but the Hunter family has a reputation that needs to be protected. If you're not ready to do that, then perhaps you should reconsider your plans for the future, including college funding." The threat was delivered politely, but that didn't make it any less serious. Tyler understood that his father was not bluffing. "Understood," he said and left the room. In his bedroom, he sat by the window for a long time, contemplating the information he had received. If everything said is true, then Miss Chase could indeed be dangerous. But something inside him resisted this version. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in his life, an adult spoke to him honestly, without attempts to hide or embellish anything. His thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was Jake. "Tyler, I need to talk to you. I had a serious conversation with my mother at home too." "About what?" "About the same thing you talked about with your father, I think. About the boundaries of teachers' influence on students." "And Connor?" "His father called him too. Apparently our parents coordinated." Tyler felt his stomach tighten. "Jake, what if we tell them we don't want to participate in this?" "Seriously? Are you ready to go against a U.S. congressman, a state Supreme Court judge, and a millionaire?" "I don't know. Maybe. Silence hung on the other end of the line. Tyler, what's happening to you? Just yesterday you wanted to put that teacher in her place. And today I'm not sure she deserves it. But if we don't comply with their demands, I know they'll take everything from us. Money, connections, the future they planned for us. So what do you suggest? Tyler was silent for a long time, then said, talk to her, honestly. Find out her version of events. Have you lost your mind? Maybe. But I'm tired of making decisions based on what other people say. I want to hear the truth from her. And what if she really is dangerous? Then we'll do as our parents demand. But if not, if she really is trying to help us, what then? Then for the first time in our lives, we'll make the right choice. That same morning, Rebecca arrived at school even earlier than usual. She sensed that the pressure would only increase and wanted to be prepared for anything. An unpleasant piece of news awaited her in the teacher's lounge. Principal Fisher had called her to his office for an important conversation. Please sit down, Miss Chase, he said, not lifting his eyes from the papers on his desk. Rebecca sat down and waited calmly. I've received complaints about your teaching methods, the principal finally began. What kind of complaints? Parents are concerned that you are trying to, how should I put it, influence the worldview of students in ways that go beyond your subject. Mr. Fisher, may I know which parents these complaints came from? The principal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's confidential information. I see. And may I know specific examples of my alleged inappropriate behavior? Well, there is information that you discuss personal issues with students that go beyond the academic curriculum. Mr. Fisher, we studied English literature and held discussions about character traits. This is standard pedagogical practice. Yes, but some parents feel that you are going too far. Rebecca looked closely at the principal. Mr. Fisher, let me be direct. Did Congressman Hunter, Judge Morrison, and Mr. Blackwell call you? Fisher paled. I can't. No need to answer. Your face has already said it all. Rebecca leaned forward. Now tell me honestly, do you really think I'm doing something wrong? Or are you just following the orders of influential people? The principal was silent for a long time, struggling with himself. Finally, he said quietly, Miss Chase, I have worked in this school for 15 years, and in all that time, I have never seen anyone reach those 3 boys. Yesterday, Connor Blackwell raised his hand in class for the first time in 2 years. Jake Morrison asked questions that showed he is really thinking about what he is studying. And Tyler Hunter, what about Tyler? He looked human for the first time since I've known him. And that's bad? No, it's a miracle, but Fisher sighed heavily. But those people can destroy my career with one phone call. I have a family, a mortgage, children to send to college. Rebecca felt genuine sympathy for him. Mr. Fisher, I understand your position, and I don't want to create problems for you. What do you mean? I mean that I am ready to fight for the right to teach these children, but I will do it on my own without putting you at risk. Miss Chase, you don't understand who you're dealing with. These people have resources, connections, opportunities, and I have the truth, and sometimes that turns out to be stronger than money. The principal shook his head. I hope you're right, but be careful, very careful. Stepping out of the principal's office, Rebecca felt the noose tightening, but she was ready for it. Moreover, she had been waiting for this moment since she decided to work at Roosevelt School. The English lesson in the afternoon began unusually. When Rebecca entered the classroom, she saw that Tyler, Jake, and Connor were sitting in the front row for the first time ever. Good morning, she greeted the students. Good morning, Miss Chase, they replied in unison, and there was something new in it, something sincere. Rebecca wrote a new phrase on the board. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable.